I'm Paul Calvaresi with the Broward MPO at the 2026 Safe Roads Summit. This morning I'm joined by Stuart Robertson of Kimley-Horn. He's a principal at the firm, but I like to call him a plangineer because that's what he calls himself. So what does that term mean to you?
Well, I do love the term plangineer, and being a plangineer to me means that I help the Broward MPO to plan for and provide conceptual designs for safe roads to help it meet its mission moving forward.
So why do you feel the conceptual designs are so important to incorporate into the engineering field?
The conceptual design phase is really where we take the idea for a project and convert it into a feasible project that can then go into the final design phase. So we want to make sure that it's feasible per the design criteria, but also able to be funded with the transportation funding sources we have available.
And by funding more projects, that obviously would increase the amount of safety projects. Is that one of your focuses?
Yes, absolutely. Helping clients find funding for projects and also making sure that they are planned in a way that's consistent with the context of the local community. So that's one of the big changes that I've seen in engineering just really over the last few years, is that engineers now design projects for context classification as well as establishing a target speed, which is the safe operating speed given the characteristics of the community that the roadway is passing through.
And for context on context classification, what does that mean?
Yeah.
For our audience that's maybe not a planner or engineer or anything in between.
So context classification means the right road for the right place. So we look at the area of the community, we look at the infrastructure of the road and the facilities that are being served, and we establish a context classification for the roadways, such as it could be natural, or rural, or suburban. It could be urban, it could be town center, it could be urban core. There are many different types of context. And then the key of it is that once the context classification is established, it changes the design criteria that the engineers use for the roadway. So we design per different criteria in an urban core area than we would in a suburban area. That is the big change in design. We no longer are building massive highways right through a town center or an urban core area.
So you wouldn't put a 6-lane, 70-mile-an-hour highway through downtown Fort Lauderdale because
that's a great
context
example.
classification doesn't call for it.
Yeah.
And then likewise in a rural area, you wouldn't have bike lanes and sidewalks necessarily because that might also not be called for?
That's right. Yeah, in a rural area, a shoulder may be perfectly acceptable for occasional use by a pedestrian or a bicyclist.
Okay, so you're right-sizing the need with the geography.
That's right. Yeah, we say the right road for the right place.
That's perfect. You mentioned funding a couple of times. How hard is it to fund these projects?
It's a big challenge. It really is. So the MPO, working with its partners, the Florida Department of Transportation, as well as U.S. Department of Transportation, are constantly looking for discretionary grants to help fund some of our larger projects, but also looking to incorporate safe streets into more routine projects like maintenance and resurfacing. So the MPO has been very successful at working with the Florida DOT to get bicycle lanes, for example, installed as part of resurfacing projects. But now that we're really focusing crucially on context and safety, we're starting to look at what the next generation of bicycle facilities may be. And the MPO, in its Roads for Families design guidelines, as well as in its Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, is now designing for separated bicycle facilities, so separated from traffic. Think of a bicycle lane that's at the sidewalk level so that you're not intermingling with cars as much.
And do you think that'll get more people onto the bicycle lanes as opposed to the current ones that are on the road?
I really do. Yeah, I think it's going to expand the use of the bicycle lanes. More people are going to be attracted to considering using bicycles for short trips or even to connect to public transit to make it a longer trip using a bicycle combined with public transit.
So you're providing more options for the cyclists that, the ones that aren't in the spandex or the super confident ones.
That's right, yeah. We're really trying to expand the attractiveness of bicycle facilities to a broader audience of the general population.
So a lot of our audience may not know our funding is very specific. So even though it all has a dollar sign on it, it's allocated for certain purposes.
That's right, yeah.
With the maintenance funds being used to mark bicycle lanes, that's one of the creative uses. Have you come across any other ways to flex the funding into something that it may not have been used previously?
Yeah, one of the things, and this is where I think the focus on innovation starts to come in, using smart technologies, we can now program safety into traffic signals, providing things like an extra long phase for a pedestrian to be able to cross the street, or start the pedestrian phase early so the pedestrian is able to have visibility as they're crossing the street before the cars start moving. So thinking about safety and incorporating that into smart technology funding sources and traffic signal funding sources is another strategy that we as engineers are using.
That's fantastic, because I've seen some of the crosswalks where, and I'm a fairly fit person, where I feel like I don't have enough time to cross, much less a child or someone who is disabled in some way.
We're even looking at potentially using infrared sensors to detect a pedestrian without them having to press the button, because we find that pedestrians don't always press the little crosswalk button on the side of the signal pole to request a crossing.
Okay, also something I love, because when I drive, I never have to ask permission to cross the street.
That's a good point.
But as a pedestrian, I have to ask permission.
I'm going to use that line in some of my public meetings.
Well, we know that it was recorded here first.
Yeah, that's true. You heard it first here.
Yeah. So what excites you about the next thing you're working on?
So one of the things that excites me is looking at sort of a long-term vision for reconnecting communities right here in Fort Lauderdale, where the Safe Road Summit is being held. So we're looking at, along with Broward MPO and the city of Fort Lauderdale, our partner on that project, we're looking at providing underpasses on certain roadways crossing the FEC Railroad Corridor in downtown Fort Lauderdale. That's the rail corridor that handles both freight traffic as well as Brightline intercity passenger rail traffic. And so we're looking at options that may reduce the number of at-grade crossings that happen, where cars and buses and people walking and biking across the railroad track, and looking at ways of maybe getting some of those crossings to happen underground in a sort of underpass that goes under the rail. So we're looking at a lot of options for that, and also working with the railroad company as well to get their input and buy-in on the concept as it moves forward in the planning phase. It's called the TRAX project, T-R-A-X, play on words there.
Well, that's always fun. So yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of people to talk to and a lot of partners involved in that one.
Yeah.
So that'll be exciting to move forward.
And one of the things that I really love about these projects is working with the community as well. So the LPO hosts public workshops for these projects, and we go into the communities of each one of the corridors that we work in, and it's just so wonderful and fascinating to meet the neighbors that are going to be interested in hearing about the project. And it also allows us to understand the community concerns and incorporate those into the planning process.
And that's where your plan engineer title comes in, where you're starting off with your concept development with the public to eventually lead to an engineering solution.
That's right. So one of the things that I always do in public workshops is have folks understand where the project is in its life cycle. And because I do work on a lot of concept development or plan engineering projects, I get to work at the phase of the project where nothing has been decided yet. Oftentimes people may have the misperception that the decisions have already been made, but on the planning process projects that the MPO works on, that's really not the case. We are there to listen to the community and incorporate their feedback into our engineering concepts to move forward into the next phase of the project.
Well, thank you for being here at the Safe Road Summit these 2 days, and thank you for joining us on our mini pod.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.